भाजपा कुछ लोग, वो लोग बहुत डिस्टर्ब किया, मंदिर टेम्पल वो बंद करके रखा, स्लोगनिंग किया, और सेंट्रल फोर्स वो जूता पहन के मंदिर में घुस के, वो जूता पहन के मंदिर में घुस के सेंट्रल फोर्स को यूज करके वो लोग अभिषेक को मंदिर में घुसने से वो रोकने की कोशिश की।
কেন্দ্রীয় বাহিনীর জওয়ান জুতো পরে ঠাকুরবাড়ির মন্দিরে প্রবেশ করেছে, আমি টুইট করেছি, ছবি আছে দেখবেন। তার জবাব আগামী দিন দেবেন কি দেবেন না? এরা ভাবছে আমরা যা ইচ্ছা তাই করব না, যখন চাইবো টাকা বন্ধ করে দেবো, যখন চাইবো কেন্দ্রীয় বাহিনীকে জুতো পরে মন্দিরের ভিতর ঢুকিয়ে দেবো। বাপের সম্পত্তি নাকি, পৈতৃক সম্পত্তি? শান্তনু ঠাকুর যদি ভেবে থাকে যে আমি অভিষেক বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায়কে আটকাবো আর অমিত শাহকে পা চেটে ঢোকাবো, আগামী দিন মানুষ জবাব দেবে। আমি মানুষের উপর ছেড়ে দিয়ে যাচ্ছি।
We're crossing over to CNN News 18's Kamalika Gupta to get us more details on this. Kamalika, can you tell us about who is for and against the demand for central forces during the Panchayat polls and what the reasoning is?
See, this is actually this total incident happened. Abhishek Banerjee is in Sanjog Yatra, Navjowar Yatra for the last 2 months. He is going to every district. Now, his yatra was going in North 24th Pargana, where this Thakurbari is. Now, what is Thakurbari? Thakurbari is this temple of Mathura community, and Mathura community is very strong in this area, bordering areas, and around 60 constituencies. They are very strong. They are the people who came from Bangladesh, the Hindu minority people who came from Bangladesh, who are absolutely the backward classes, and they worship this. They have this temple here. Now, this temple,
Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost, and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. It's Monday night here in India. There's a lot of news to cover. We are starting with West Asia, and it's witnessing a shift. It's something we've been saying for a while now. The United States is losing ground. China is expanding its footprint, and Riyadh is paving the way for it. Yesterday, the Saudi energy minister sent a clear message to Washington, D.C. He said Western concerns about China do not matter. This comes after America's top diplomat visited Riyadh to fix ties. We'll tell you why America and Saudi Arabia are drifting apart and why this has advantaged China. And the bad news for Washington does not end there. Pakistan has bought its first consignment of Russian oil. More political drama in the UK. Former Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon was arrested. George Soros is retiring. We'll tell you about his successor and son, Alexander Soros. And did you know that curly hair had a role to play in the evolution of the human race? We'll tell you all about it. The headlines first. America is set to rejoin UNESCO. The US will try to return to the UN body next month. It fears that China is filling the gap left behind by them. The US is a founding member of UNESCO. 6 years ago, the Trump administration quit the body, accusing it of having an anti-Israel bias. Israel's former Prime Minister testifies at Netanyahu's corruption trial. Yair Lapid claims that the Israeli Prime Minister had tried to get him to back legislation that would benefit a Hollywood mogul. Lapid testified in Jerusalem in one of the 3 corruption cases against Netanyahu. Vaccine maker BioNTech faces its first legal claim in its home country of Germany. The lawsuit is over adverse effects allegedly suffered by some users of its COVID jabs. The vaccines, which were developed at breakneck speed, are facing legal hurdles in France and the UK as well. A pre-trial hearing for the man accused of killing Shinzo Abe cancelled over a suspicious object. It was later found to not be dangerous. Yamagami is facing trial for assassinating Japan's former prime minister in July last year. The 42-year-old man could face the death penalty if convicted. And former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi dies at the age of 86. The scandal-ridden media mogul was admitted to a Milan hospital on Friday. He was undergoing tests related to leukemia. Several years ago, the US and Saudi Arabia made a pact, a fairly straightforward deal: oil for security. The US got Saudi oil. In exchange, it gave Saudi Arabia security guarantees. That was the deal. This arrangement has lasted for over 7 decades, but now it is under strain. The US and Saudi Arabia are at odds, and it is Vantage China. Tonight, we'll tell you how. Riyadh is hosting a major summit. It is called the Arab-China Conference. On day one, they signed 30 agreements. We're talking about deals worth $10 billion, but that's not even the biggest headline. I'll tell you what is. A statement from Saudi Arabia's energy minister, Prince Abdul Aziz bin Salman. He's an older brother of MBS. He was asked about Riyadh's deepening ties with Beijing and the growing suspicions in the West over it. Do you know what the Saudi minister said? Let me quote from his response. I actually ignore it because as a business person, now you'll go where opportunity comes your way. We don't have to be facing any choice which has to do with saying either with us or with the others. So the Saudis say they just ignore Western suspicions, and that's not all. They want to do more business with China. Listen to this.
When it comes to oil demand in China is still growing. So of course we have to capture some of that demand. So as chemical, we want to invest in China because we also have an ambitious program on crude to chemicals.
So the message is quite clear. Deeper ties with China are on the horizon, and the US will just have to deal with it. Needless to say, Washington is not thrilled. Just last week, Antony Blinken was in Riyadh. He's America's top diplomat, their foreign minister. He met with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He also spoke with senior Saudi officials. And his message was this: the US is not leaving the region anytime soon, and Riyadh can count on Washington.
The United States is in this region today, and we remain deeply invested in partnering with all of you to build the brightest and strongest possible future of the Middle East. And indeed, with GCC at the core of our vision for a Middle East that is more stable, more secure, more prosperous, more integrated.
The reassurance hasn't moved the needle, though. Riyadh is still keen on engaging with China, and there's a reason for that. There's a trust deficit between the US and Saudi Arabia. Their differences are out in the open. You may remember this from last year, in fact. US President Joe Biden went to Saudi Arabia. He did not even shake hands with the Crown Prince. They fist bumped each other. The encounter was awkward, to say the least. Remember, Biden had pledged to turn Saudi Arabia into a pariah state. And here he was, trying to woo the same kingdom. MBS did not take kindly to that. Behind the scenes, he's said to have been tough with American officials. Reports say months before Blinken visited Riyadh, MBS had adopted a very harsh tone with Washington. Privately, he threatened to, quote-unquote, fundamentally alter ties with the US. What does that even mean, fundamentally altering ties? Reports say the Crown Prince suggested that he, and I'm quoting again, that he will not deal with the US administration anymore. He also promised, quote-unquote, major economic consequences for Washington. When did this happen? In October last year. Apparently, when Biden too was making threats, he had vowed to impose consequences on Saudi Arabia. What for? For cutting back the supply of oil in international markets. As it turned out, Biden did nothing of the sort, and MBS has prevailed. But it further weakened the relationship. Saudi officials have a long list of complaints. They think the US has become unreliable. They point at America's recent failures, like the hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan or the decision to withdraw support from Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. This was more than a decade back. It led to his downfall in 2011. Hosni Mubarak used to lead Egypt. The Saudis believe that in both these instances, America failed in its role as a net security provider in the region. Plus, they're upset over Iran. The Saudis are of the view that Washington has done little to contain Tehran. Hence the unease. It got worse with the Biden presidency. Enter China with money and with no lectures on human rights. The Saudis began exploring. The Chinese have excellent ties with Iran too. In March this year, they brokered a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The two countries restored diplomatic ties. Last week, Iran reopened its embassy in Riyadh, and it happened at the same time when Blinken was in town. The message would not have been lost on the Americans. They failed to revive the nuclear deal with Iran, and now they're losing their grip on Saudi Arabia too. Washington is trying a different approach now. Instead of being combative, it is looking for dialogue. But Riyadh is not warming up to that. As of today, China has the upper hand. The US may have lost one old ally in Saudi Arabia, But is it on the verge of losing another one too? I'm talking about Pakistan. Today, Islamabad received its first cargo of discounted Russian oil. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif called it a transformative day, the dawn of a new relationship between Russia and Pakistan. He sounds thrilled, to be honest. And why won't he? Who doesn't like cheap oil? You see, Pakistan's economy is on the verge of collapse. Energy payments make up for most of its external payments. So cheaper crude is in Pakistan's interest. But guess who won't be too stoked about it? The United States. Imagine this, your longtime ally signing a deal with your enemy. But that's geopolitics for you. Historical ties hardly matter when your economy is crumbling. The question is, but how did Pakistan get here? Murmurs of a deal with Russia began last year. Finance Minister Ishaq Dar was the first to mention it. He said Pakistan was considering buying Russian oil. Ironically, he cited India's example. Dar said New Delhi was buying Russian oil for cheap, so Islamabad had the right to explore this avenue too. Soon, Pakistan's petroleum minister flew to Moscow. His name is Musaddiq Malik. On his return, he had an important announcement to make. He said Russia would provide Pakistan with discounted crude. The prospect made them happy, but it was short-lived. That same month, Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari visited Washington, and there he shot down any plans of purchasing Russian oil. That was December 2022. 1 month later, things changed again. A Russian delegation arrived in Islamabad. They were there to finalize the oil deal. By April, Pakistan had already placed its first order. Fast forward to today, and the first cargo of Russian oil has reached Islamabad. So are Bhutto's statements just hogwash? Or did he not want to anger Washington while on its soil? Either way, the developments pose a problem for America. You see, Pakistan and Russia have a troubled history, and most of that is thanks to the US. In 1950, Moscow invited Pakistan's first prime minister for a visit. Islamabad declined. Instead, it accepted Washington's invite. That snub did not go down too well with Moscow. Then came the Cold War. Pakistan was Washington's crucial ally during that period. It even provided its air bases to the United States. Again, in 1980, the US backed Afghan insurgencies against the Soviet invasion. Pakistan was at the forefront of that. Long story short, there's a lot of bad blood between Moscow and Islamabad. Then what explains the oil deal? Well, economics and politics. Russia wants to sell oil, Pakistan wants to buy cheap oil. As for the politics, Pakistan's ties with the US are deteriorating. The Biden administration was cold to Imran Khan. Then he visited Russia, right on the eve of the Ukraine war. Terrible timing, you would think, but for Imran Khan, this was the perfect opportunity. He was trying to forge ties with Moscow. Well, as things turned out, he was ousted from office. Since then, the generals in Pakistan have tried some damage control with the US. Meanwhile, the Russians are seeking out allies and buyers of oil. Anyone they can find, even Pakistan. They want economic ties, not defense cooperation yet. Russia says a weak Pakistan will not be good for the region, neither for India nor for Afghanistan. Also, this deal gives them a new market to sell their oil. For Pakistan, it's like getting the best of both worlds, cheap Russian oil on one hand and Western military support on the other. Because remember, despite all of this, Washington is still giving them military support, including the most recent upgrade of F-16s worth $450 million. So the question is, how is America allowing all of this? Pakistan remains their major non-NATO ally, amongst the biggest recipients of their military aid. Have the Americans lost sway over the generals, like the Arab sheikhs? Or are they sanctimonious lectures only for countries like India? Meanwhile, another Russian partner is in the headlines. I'm talking about North Korea. Their supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, has issued a statement of support for Russia and President Vladimir Putin. North Korean state media published the message earlier today. Let me quote from what it says. Justice is sure to win, and the Russian people will continue to add glory to the history of victory. Kim went on to say that he would be, and I'm quoting, he would be holding hands firmly with the Russian president in conformity with the common desire of the peoples of the two countries to fulfill the grand goal of building a powerful country. Yes, Kim Jong-un spoke about holding hands with Putin. The message came today on the occasion of Russia's National Day. June 12, 1990, is when Russia adopted a new constitution. This was after the fall of the Soviet Union. And June 12th is now a public holiday in Russia, which explains the timing of Kim's heartfelt message to Putin. But this isn't the first time that Kim has publicly shown support for Putin. He's been firmly in Putin's camp since Russia invaded Ukraine last year. He has continuously blamed the West. He accuses them of forcing Russia's hand. When the war began last February, this is what North Korea said, and I'm quoting again, "The root cause of the Ukraine crisis totally lies in the hegemonic policy of the US and the West, which enforce themselves in high-handedness and abuse of power against other countries." So Kim's latest tribute to Putin is a continuation of the same stand. This time, though, he did not mention the war. He praised what he called Putin's correct decision and guidance against hostile forces. Now, you may wonder, why such a show of support? Other Russian allies like China have maintained neutrality, or at least pretended to, even offered a peace plan that seems to have sunk without a trace. But North Korea is not talking peace. It is only professing its support for Russia. And this is a relationship that goes back many decades. In fact, it would be fair to say that the Soviet Union helped give birth to North Korea and the Kim dynasty. Here's a quick primer. Before the Koreas were divided, it was one nation under Japanese occupation. This was during the Second World War. It was Japanese-held Korea. Soviet troops entered from the north to liberate Korea. The Americans came in from the other side to resist. They did not want a communist regime to take over Korea. So the Americans and the Soviets fought a proxy war here. They created two occupation zones in Korea, a Soviet zone and an American zone. They divided Korea along the 38th parallel. What is the 38th parallel? The line that is still the border between the two Koreas. There were plans for reunification, but Moscow and Washington did not trust each other, so each installed their own governor in Korea. Do you know who is North Korea's governor? Kim Il-sung, the grandfather of the current leader Kim Jong-un. So the relationship is old, and both sides have maintained it. Moscow and Pyongyang. They've maintained the relationship. Russia regularly shields North Korea at the United Nations. It has resisted Western sanctions against Pyongyang, and the North does face a lot of sanctions, mostly over their nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Moscow also has trade and humanitarian ties with North Korea. In March, the US reported that Russia was sending food to Pyongyang. This is March this year. North Korea suffered a devastating drought last year, and a major food crisis has followed. In recent years, in fact, Pyongyang has also been dependent on China for food imports, but of late, China has not been of much help. It was restricting food exports because of the Wuhan virus. So instead of Beijing, this time Moscow decided to help. And this may seem like a generous humanitarian move, but experts say this was a quid pro quo. That in exchange for food, North Korea gave weapons to Russia, missiles to help in the ongoing war. North Korea, of course, has denied all of this, but there's no doubt that its links to Russia run deep. The Hermit Kingdom has a lot to thank Moscow for, and Kim's words and public display of support are proof. Let's talk about China now. Last week, we told you about some statements made by PLA officials. They said India does not pose a threat to them. And now India's military leadership seems to be giving a response to them. The Indian Navy is demonstrating its capabilities. They've conducted drills in the Arabian Sea. These drills involved India's biggest warships, INS Vikramaditya and INS Vikrant, plus 35 aircraft and other warships. Together, they're called carrier battle groups. What are they? A carrier battle group is a naval fleet. It consists of an aircraft carrier, which is at the front, and a large number of ships around it. The carrier is capable of launching ships and choppers. It's like a complete package, a floating air base of sorts. So what is the purpose of this exercise? Power projection, showcasing the Indian Navy's ability to operate not just in the immediate waters surrounding India, but beyond as well. Here is what a spokesperson of the Navy said about the drills, and I'm quoting, "The demonstration of naval prowess underscores India's commitment to safeguarding its national interests, maintaining regional stability, and fostering cooperative partnerships in the maritime domain." The Indian Navy is upgrading its capabilities. It is gearing up to meet the China challenge. You see, recent events at the border have led to a revelation. The PLA is a threat, not just on land, but also at sea. At the same time, India is at a vantage point on the high seas. There are key sea routes in the region. These are essential to the Chinese economy. I'm talking about the likes of Malacca Strait. This is a narrow waterway and a major vulnerability for China. In 2016, almost 80% of China's oil imports came through here. Also, about 20% of the global maritime trade and 60% of China's trade inflows, they go through this region. So this route is vital for China and its economy, and India is in a position to block it. Recent reports say that India is also planning a new naval base. It will be built on the Great Nicobar Island. This base will overlook the entrance to the Malacca Strait. It will give clear tactical advantages to India, so a provocation in the Himalayas may be answered from the Great Nicobar Island. India could consider blocking Chinese tankers, and from the same base, India would be in a position to watch Chinese movements in the Indian Ocean. Also monitor China in the South China Sea. Remember, this is another major international flashpoint, the South China Sea. And such a base is increasingly critical for India because Chinese activities in the Indian Ocean are growing. Consider what India's Navy chief said in the month of April, and I'm quoting, "We're keeping a very close watch in the Indian Ocean region. An effort is to know whose presence is there and what they're up to, monitoring it 24/7, and we deploy aircraft, UAVs, ships, submarines, etc." China, you know, has the world's biggest navy. And it's expanding. It is building more warships. The PLA has plans to deploy more assets to the Indian Ocean region. Today, China has 2 carriers, Liaoning and Shandong, and they're working on a third one. It's called Fujian. Then there are Chinese bases in the region, like Djibouti and Gwadar in the west, and Hambantota in the south. So the trajectory is quite clear. China is building capacity to control this region in every theater of conflict. So India's best bet is to prepare. And these drills by the Indian Navy show that New Delhi is firming up its defenses. The Americans, too, are grappling with the China threat, much closer home than they'd anticipated, perhaps. There is a Chinese spying station in America's backyard, and the U.S. is reluctant to even admit it. Last week, a report shook up Washington. It talked about an agreement between China and Cuba. The story said China wants to build a spy base in Cuba, wants to, and Havana will be paid billions for it. The White House responded with a denial, and now they've made a U-turn. Turns out China already has a snooping station in Cuba. So a statement has been issued. It gives a detailed account of China's activities. Apparently, the snooping base has been there for decades. The exact location has not been shared, but back in 2019, China upgraded this facility. We don't have the specifics of what it can do, but a base in Cuba gives Beijing some clear advantages. The island is around 100 miles or 160 kilometers from Florida, Cuba. From there, China can target Southeast America. It can eavesdrop on U.S. military exchanges, even commercial communication. The bigger worry is the potential snooping on U.S. military bases. There are dozens of them in the region, including some very important ones, like the headquarters of the U.S. Central Command. It oversees West Asia and parts of Central and South Asia. There is also the U.S. Special Operations Command. Again, this is an important military base, and China could potentially eavesdrop on it. Its presence in Cuba poses a threat. And until last week, the U.S. did not even want to admit to this. When the first report came out, this is what the White House said. "I've seen that press report. It is not accurate." These were their words. The Pentagon, too, pushed back against these claims.
So I've seen that reporting. I can tell you based on the information that we have that is not accurate, that we are not aware of China and Cuba developing any type of spy stations.
Not accurate. That's what he said. Now, the U.S. has completely reversed its stance. So what is Team Biden's defense? Well, they're shifting blame. They say it did not happen on our watch. Reports say Biden and his team were briefed about these developments when they took office. I'm talking about January 2021. And Cuba is just one country they were told about. Back then, China was considering setting up such bases all over the world: the Atlantic, Latin America, West Asia, Central Asia, Africa, the Indo-Pacific. It seems every one was on China's radar. And how does the US plan to counter this? Through diplomacy, they say. American officials say they're engaging with countries across the world. They're trying to stop China from executing its plans. In response, this is what China has to say.
Last week, I already made clear China's position over the relevant question. Over the past 2 days, we have seen the US government and media releasing a great deal of inconsistent information on the alleged construction of so-called Chinese spy facilities in Cuba. Once again, this is just a farce put on by the self-contradictory US.
China says these claims are a farce. They don't have many buyers, though. But there is a larger question here. It is about the United States and its China policy. It seems confused, to say the least. One day they talk about decoupling with China. The next day they talk about de-risking. They want to lead the world in countering China, but turns out they're trying to hide a Chinese spy base in their backyard. How do you think America's allies will see this? There will be questions, no doubt. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is traveling to China in a few days. Will he bring up these snooping stations? Will he confront China? We don't know that yet. But this visit will be a test for Biden's China policy, and the world will be watching closely. China snooping on the US may be what great spy flicks are made of. But if you're looking for some good old drama, tune into some UK politics. There is no end to the drama here. On Sunday, former Scottish leader Nicola Sturgeon was arrested. She was questioned by the police for over 7 hours. Sturgeon was released soon after. She was quick to proclaim her innocence, but the arrest sent shockwaves through Scottish politics. Sturgeon's arrest was part of a financial probe. The police are investigating her party, the Scottish National Party, or SNP. They're looking into the party's funding and finances. In April this year, they arrested Sturgeon's husband. This time, it was her turn. So what is this investigation about? Time for a quick backstory. Scotland and England united to form Great Britain in the year 1707. But soon, Scotland got tired of this arrangement. It wanted its own government. Enter the referendums of 1979 and then 1999. These gave Scotland its own parliament, but not the much-needed independence it desired. So in 2014, Scotland voted in a referendum for independence. 55% voted to stay, 45% wanted to walk out. So obviously, no independence for Scotland. But the Scottish National Party, or SNP, wanted to give it another go. So this party asked for funds for another referendum campaign. More than £600,000 were donated to the party. That's around $750,000 US. These donations were made by activists. It was supposed to be for Scottish independence, but it looks like these funds were diverted. In 2021, the police received complaints about this. So they launched Operation Branch Form. First, Sturgeon's husband, also the party's chief executive, was questioned. Second, the party headquarters were raided. And third, the party treasurer was arrested. And now Sturgeon has been questioned too. She may have been released for now, but this scandal has plunged her party, the SNP, into a deep crisis. Many in the party want Nicola Sturgeon suspended. And this could be a tough call for her successor, the new First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf. But for the so-called Queen of Scots, this is a spectacular fall from grace. Sturgeon was once one of Britain's most formidable politicians, one of the UK's most formidable politicians. But her resignation as First Minister in February and the financial probe right now means that Sturgeon is no longer the invincible presence she once was. And she's not the only one in trouble. There is more drama in UK politics. Meet Boris Johnson, the embattled former UK Prime Minister, the man who was the source of many scandals. 2 days ago, Boris Johnson resigned as a Member of Parliament. He saw the findings of the Partygate investigation committee. You may remember Partygate. When the whole country was in lockdown, Boris Johnson and his team were apparently partying. It led to a scandal. It forced Johnson to resign as Prime Minister. And now it looks like it may have cost him his seat in the Parliament too. Johnson called the findings a witch hunt. and he jumped the gun. He quit before he could be forced out. Now, Johnson and Sturgeon are very different leaders, and these are two very different cases. But they do have something in common. They're not giving their successors, Hamza Yusuf and Rishi Sunak, an easy time. Now let's talk about George Soros. The controversial financier is retiring. At 92, George Soros is finally ready to pass on the baton. His infamous organization, the Open Society Foundation, or OSF, is getting a new head. Who is this chosen successor? Will control his $25 billion empire. His son, Alexander Soros, goes by Alex, is Soros' fourth child. Who is this man? What has he done so far? And what are his plans for the future? Our next report has more.
Meet Alexander Soros. He's a 37-year-old billionaire philanthropist, an allegedly reformed party animal who now spends his time donating to causes like environmental protection, education in Africa, and helping domestic workers. And of course, he plays a role in influencing politics. Because Alexander, or Alex, is the son of George Soros, the billionaire financier who keeps getting accused of meddling in international affairs. 92-year-old George Soros is finally retiring, stepping down from his $25 billion empire, leaving the helm of the Open Society Foundations. The OSF is an organization which donates to political parties around the world. It supports left-wing candidates and parties. For example, George Soros is one of the biggest donors to the US Democratic Party. He maintains that he supports causes like abortion and voting rights, that he funds parties likely to protect these values. But he's been accused of meddling in international politics and doing his best to crush conservative right-wing parties. Now, instead of rejoicing at the news of his retirement, the political right may want to be wary. It turns out their battle may just get tougher. George Soros confirmed his retirement during an interview. He said his son Alex would succeed him. Alex is Soros' fourth child. He has two elder brothers and an elder sister, and he also has a younger brother. Alex wasn't always going to inherit the Soros empire. His elder brother Jonathan was poised to succeed his father, but reports say Jonathan had a falling out with the family. And then Alex apparently gained his father's support. George Soros says that initially he didn't want any of his children to inherit the OSF. But then he changed his mind and said Alex had earned it. It might be a reference to the journey of reformation Alex went through. Alex reportedly loved to party back in the day. A few years ago, he was making headlines for the wrong reasons. But since then, he's had an image makeover. Alex joined the OSF in 2011. He became a member of the board. Then he established the Alexander Soros Foundation in 2012. He uses this to donate to causes he cares about, like the environment and education. He also completed a PhD in modern European history from Berkeley. It's a far cry from the party animal life, and that might be how he managed to earn the OSF. Alex was present at the interview where George Soros confirmed his retirement. The heir then made a statement. He described himself as, quote-unquote, more political than his father. And Alex threw down the gauntlet. He said, and I quote, "As much as I would love to get money out of politics, as long as the other side is doing it, we'll have to do it too." Yes, Alex will be continuing his father's tradition of funding politics. He's already been doing it as part of the OSF board, but now he'll be the one calling the shots. There are no questions about what he'll do in the US. Alex is known to be a frequent visitor to the White House. Those visits are likely to get more frequent in the run-up to next year's US presidential election. But what about the rest of the world? Where will Alex choose to spend the Soros billions? And how will right-wing parties fight the OSF's influence? We'll keep you updated as it all unfolds.
Let's talk tennis now. First, the prosaic details in case you missed all the action on Sunday. There is a new French Open men's champion. And no, he's not one of the much-wanted younger guns. Instead, he's a 36-year-old father of two. Novak Djokovic, the same guy who won the Australian Open this year, that was hard court. In Paris, it was clay. And there's a big difference, as anyone who plays tennis will tell you. But when you're Djokovic, it's triple talk. With this win, the Serb now has 23 Grand Slam titles, more than anyone else in men's history. His closest competitor is Rafael Nadal with 22 titles. Nadal missed the French Open due to injury and his return to the court remains uncertain. Then you have Roger Federer, the eternal fan favourite. He retired last year with 20 Grand Slam titles. For the last 2 decades, these three have shattered almost all tennis records. But the real winner has been the sport itself. 3 superstars playing in the same era. It has never happened before and unlikely to happen again. And don't get me wrong, there have been many great rivalries in the past. Bjorn Borg versus John McEnroe, Pete Sampras versus Andre Agassi. But Federer versus Nadal versus Djokovic has been a treat like no other. Even the newly crowned French Open champion acknowledged it.
I still think that everyone has a unique journey that they should embrace and stick to. But of course, having the three of us with Andy, of course, as well, that we cannot forget. In the last 20 years, we kind of reached the golden era of the men's tennis, and as people like to call it. So I'm really grateful to be part of this group of guys.
Like Djokovic mentioned, the big three were originally the big four. Making up the quartet was Andy Murray. His career has been waylaid due to injuries. The Brit still plays, but with a metal hip. While Murray is a shadow of his former self on the tennis court, it tells us the stuff champions are made of, even when they're not winning. But back to winning. Among the big three, initially, it was Federer and Nadal who hogged all the limelight. Federer's artistry on court, Nadal's grit, their great rivalry, and their even greater bromance. Djokovic was almost always an afterthought, the court jester. If it were a movie, he would be the friend of the protagonist, or sidekick, if you were to be uncharitable. But Djokovic had a different script in mind.
Well, the truth is that I've always, compared myself to these guys because those are the 2 greatest rivals I ever had in my career. And I've said it before, many times that they have actually defined me as a player, and all the success that I have, they've contributed to it in a way, because of the rivalries and the matchups that we had, and countless hours of thinking and analyzing and what it takes to win against them on the biggest stage. For me and my team, it was just those 2 guys. Were occupying my mind for the last 15 years quite a lot, and in a professional sense.
The court jester has not lost his sense of humour, but that steely determination is still clear. While Djokovic started out in the shadow of Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal, in recent years, he has eclipsed them. His tennis turnaround has been dramatic, to put it mildly. He was always good, but suddenly he leapfrogged to being almost unbeatable. From war-torn Serbia to the Tennis Hall of Fame, this journey has been remarkable. His parents admit they put all their resources to help their eldest son achieve his dream, so much so that they now feel guilty of neglecting his 2 younger brothers. They're also tennis players, but their careers never reached the vertiginous heights of Djokovic's. But then again, how many can? This happens once in a lifetime, and that too if you're lucky. So is Djokovic the greatest male player of all time? The record books say so. But if you ask the fans, the answer is not so straightforward. While Djokovic's dedicated fan base is Noel fam, would vociferously agree, Federer and Nadal supporters, and there's a sizable number of them, would disagree. Plus, Djokovic has always been controversy's child, from being an anti-vaxxer to his recent remarks on Kosovo. Winning on court has been far easier for the Serb than winning the hearts of tennis fans. And it has been a sore spot for him too, especially because Federer and Nadal are so universally loved. Now, you would think if Djokovic has the most Grand Slams, then he is the greatest of all time or GOAT. Well, statistically, yes, but you seldom choose your heroes based on statistics. It's more like a one-sided love story without much logic or reason. When asked if he thought he deserved the GOAT title, Djokovic chose to play it safe.
I mean, I don't want to say that I am the greatest because I feel I've said it before, it's disrespectful towards all the great champions in different eras of our sport that was played in a completely different way than it is played today. So I feel like each great champion of his own generation has left a huge mark, a legacy, and paved the way for us to be able to play this sport in such a great stage worldwide.
But he's not thinking of his legacy. He's thinking about Wimbledon, the next Grand Slam tournament, because he is nowhere close to being done. There is still plenty left in the tank.
Of course, journey is still not over. I feel, if I'm winning slams, why even think about, ending the career that already has been going on for 20 years. I look forward already to Wimbledon.
36-year-old and at the top of his game despite all odds. Players half his age can't seem to find a way to beat him. Just a few years ago, it would be curtains down on your sporting career if you touched 30. Djokovic, who's back to being number one, is defying those odds, and how? But then again, the Serb has been rewriting history for decades now, from 1 to 23 Grand Slams and counting. Our last story, as I'm sure you can tell, is about hair and its role in evolution. A new study has thrown light on hair and the human species over millions of years. Apparently, curly hair helped keep human heads cool and aided the development of the human brain. Our next report has the details.
The things we do to appear cool, right? Getting our fashion sense on point, staying up to date with the latest trends, and even getting our hairstyles right. But what if we've been styling our hair wrong all along and doing the very things that make us uncool? Here's an interesting figure. Over 60% of the world's population either has curly or wavy hair, but not many people like their hair curled up, especially not in India. Indians consider straight hair to be the ideal type. But a recent study has found that curly hair could actually be an asset, a shield for our body, if you will. Researchers from Penn State University in the US and Loughborough University in England came across an interesting finding during their investigation. They found how early humans in Africa stayed cool and hydrated. They didn't have cold water or air conditioners, obviously, but what helped them was curly hair. Not only did curly hair keep them cool, but also protected them against extreme heat and the sun's harmful rays. How's that, you would think? Well, thickly coiled hair has been found to help the human body conserve water by minimizing the need for sweating. Equatorial Africa is thought to be the epicenter of human evolution. Now take a guess. How did staying cool and protected from harmful sun rays help early humans? It actually played a crucial role in the development of the human brain. Humans started walking upright somewhere around 3 million years ago. Around 2 million years ago, humans were fully evolved, but the size of their brain was smaller than it is today. Here's where curly hair came to the rescue. Tina Lassisi, who conducted the research at the Penn State University, says,
We think scalp hair provided a passive mechanism to reduce the amount of heat gained from solar radiation that our sweat glands couldn't.
No scientific research can never be complete without experiments. So the researchers used a mannequin to test the effects of solar radiation on different human hair wigs, and they found that tightly curled hair provided the best protection against the sun's heat. Now, humans are creatures of their time, which is why hairstyles are such a big thing. Today, they're a fashion symbol, but thinking that they're nothing more than a cosmetic prop would be highly reductive on our part. Hair protects the scalp, and in fact, it's a vital part of our natural defenses. Eyebrows, eyelashes, and even the hair in our nostrils keep nasty foreign particles away. Hair also plays a crucial role in our sensory perception. Hair follicles are surrounded by a network of nerve endings, which is why they're sensitive to touch. In the evolutionary scheme of things, this sensory perception allowed humans to identify threats, like insects on their skin. So, the next time you pick up that hair straightener, you might want to replace it with a curling iron and do your body a solid one.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with Egypt. A tourist boat caught fire off the Red Sea coast. 3 British tourists have gone missing. In the US, a major highway collapsed in the state of Pennsylvania. This happened after a truck under the highway caught fire. And in South Korea, a British man tried to climb the world's 6th tallest building without ropes. He was halfway up the skyscraper when authorities intervened. The man has been detained now. And finally, what makes the 12th of June significant? We're taking you back in history. On this day in 1964, Nelson Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment. The man who dared to oppose the apartheid regime in South Africa was accused of sabotage. In his 27-year jail term, Mandela was confined to a small cell and was forced into hard labor, but he remained unbroken. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
And also, you will recall that Shahnawaz, in a perfect roadmap, indoctrinating children, picking out those who are trusting, those who are vulnerable, and feeding them on the nonsense of Zakir Naik, who speaks like God, and also other inflammatory material, and then trying to convert them. This is one part. Then getting money from Dubai and Pakistan. Do you think for a moment that it is possible for a lone wolf to do that? Certainly not.
Yeah.
There is a close, coordinated gang action, and it is a case where extra national and those outside India are also planning India 2047 like the PFI. Do you not see the similarity between the PFI roadmap and the roadmap of Shahnawaz and the like? Obviously there is. And to get conversions of this manner, they have handlers sitting in Pakistan and Dubai who are guiding the lives of the unemployed.
But Vikram Singh Saab, before I go to Kaligur Rahman, how easy or difficult would this be to prove in a court of law? These are so far, allegations made by the Ghaziabad police. They've managed to get a transit remand to the main accused. Of course, cross-questioning will happen, his interrogation will happen, basis that they will build a case. But, this is going to be technologically arduous for them to be able to scan back and retrieve chats from 3 years ago. And that too, these are not WhatsApp chats. These are chats on a gaming platform.
You are so right, but you've answered your question yourself, Mr. Zaka, that IT-enabled and IT crimes are so easy to uncover and prove in a court of law. There is documentation, there's encryption, there's a financial trail, there's also a corroborative evidence that is face-to-face of the victims and also of Shahnawaz. Let us not live in illusion. Shahnawaz would be subjected to the lie detector test and the polygraph test, and also the other incorporated and other evidence will also be incorporated in the
Okay.
investigation. Therefore, it is one of the easier investigations to prove in a court of law, much as I would like to lay a bet also that this case is going to end in conviction because it has already incontrovertible evidence.
Anila Singh, so this case apparently came to light on the 30th of May. The first FIR was filed. This was in the Kavinagar police station in Ghaziabad. The father of one of the victims, who happens to be a minor, went to the police and complained that his son was being lured into accepting Islam while he was playing an online game. And apparently it came to light because his son was saying that he was going to the gym 5 times every day. And then this father on one day grew suspicious, followed his son. Turns out his son was going to the Sector 23 Jama Masjid and not to the gym. What would you say to parents who are watching this? Obviously, parents have, a lot of parents who are watching this have kids who are playing video games. And it's a different world out there. You don't know, what these video games are, who your kids are talking to. What would you say to them in light of this case that has come to light?
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Big breaking news coming in from Madhya Pradesh, ladies and gentlemen. This is news coming in from Bhopal, where efforts are still underway to douse the fire that broke out at the Satpura Bhavan. Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan has spoken to Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and sought the help of the Indian Air Force to extinguish the fire. The Defence Minister has directed IAF teams to reach Bhopal tonight. The Chief Minister has also dialed the Prime Minister and reviewed the situation on the ground. MP Ministers Narottam Mishra and Vishwas Sarang have also visited the site. Those visuals on your screen, ladies and gentlemen, a mega blaze has rocked Bhopal. This is taking place at the Satpura Bhavan. At the Satpura Bhavan, and Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan has spoken to Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and sought help from the Air Force to extinguish the fire. And I'm joined by Jitendra Sharma, who's live from the location. Also, Shailendra Chauhan will join us as well. Actually, Shailendra is with us on the broadcast. He's reporting live from the location. Shailendra, ground zero से latest update क्या है?
देखिए, अभी सतपुड़ा भवन की 5वीं 6ठी मंजिल और 7वीं जो मंजिल है, इन तीनों पर आग पहुंच चुकी है और अब मुख्यमंत्री शिवराज सिंह चौहान लगातार मॉनिटरिंग कर रहे हैं। आप देखिए कि आपको ऊपर जो 5वीं 6ठी और तीनों मंजिल नजर आएगी। यहाँ पर आप देखिए चारों तरफ धुआं है, अंधेर। अभी जो हिस्सा है यहाँ पर, इस हिस्से में आग पर थोड़ा काबू पाया गया है, लेकिन इसके जो आगे की तरफ है, आगे अभी भी धधक रहा है और आगे का पूरा फ्लोर लगातार जल रहा है। हम पीछे की तरफ हैं, अब आगे की तरफ आग ने जोर पकड़ लिया है, लगातार आग धधकती जा रही है और जिस तरह की स्थिति है, ये लग रहा है कि अभी आग पर काबू पाना मुश्किल है। इसीलिए यहाँ पर सेना की मदद ली जा रही है। मुख्यमंत्री शिवराज सिंह चौहान ने प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी से बात की है, उनको पूरी घटना के बारे में बताया है और इसके अलावा उन्होंने राजनाथ सिंह से बात की है। उसके अलावा उन्होंने जो भी तमाम सेना के अफसरों से भी बात कर और जितनी भी व्यवस्थाएं हैं उसको करने के निर्देश दिए गए हैं और अभी ऐसा लग रहा है कि यहाँ पर अभी 2 हेलीकॉप्टर भी बुलाए जा रहे हैं ताकि ऊपर से कोशिश करके आग पर काबू पाया जा सके। सतपुड़ा भवन काफ़ी महत्वपूर्ण इमारत है। वल्लभ भवन के बाद यही इमारत है जिसमें सतपुड़ा भवन संचालित होता है, जिसमें कि सारे संचालनालय हैं। ये आदिम जाति विभाग के जो दफ्तर है, वहाँ से सबसे पहले 3री मंजिल से आग पकड़ी थी, उसके बाद 4थी, 5वीं, 6ठी और उसके बाद टावर, जितना भी सारा हिस्सा है सब आग की चपेट में है। और आप देखेंगे लगातार कि मिलिट्री पुलिस लगी हुई है और पूरे रेस्क्यू ऑपरेशन को मिलिट्री ने अपने हाथ में ले लिया है। बाकी नगर निगम प्रशासन और फायर कर्मी, 2 फायर फाइटर, तमाम तरह के प्रशासनिक जितना भी अमला है पूरा यहाँ पर झोंक दिया गया है और अभी भी स्थिति कंट्रोल में नहीं रही है, क्योंकि आग किसी न किसी एक हिस्से में फिर आग बढ़ जाती है, फैल जाती है। तो ये इतनी बड़ी इमारत है कि हर हिस्से में कहीं ना कहीं पर आग है। अभी हमें यहाँ पर देखिए धुआं ही धुआं, गुबार नजर आ रहा होगा। इसके अलावा आगे की तरफ अभी देखिए इतनी आग है कि यहाँ पर अभी गृह मंत्री नरोत्तम मिश्रा पहुंच चुके हैं, उसके अलावा विश्वास सारंग भी पहुंच चुके हैं। तो ये मंत्री नजर रखे हुए, सीएम हाउस से मुख्यमंत्री शिवराज सिंह चौहान मॉनिटरिंग कर रहे हैं, वो लगातार पूरे रेस्क्यू पर नजर रखे हुए हैं। ये अच्छी बात है कि यहाँ पर कोई जन माल की हानि नहीं हुई है, लेकिन अभी जब मिलिट्री पुलिस आ चुकी है, उन्होंने भी पूरा संभाला है, तो यहाँ पर किसी तरह की जनहानि नहीं है। लेकिन ये चिंता हालांकि बात है कि अभी तक आग पर काबू नहीं पाया जा सका है।
Right, so that is the latest that's coming in from ground zero. What we are learning is that the military police is on the ground to coordinate the firefighting efforts. The fire is still raging, ladies and gentlemen, at the Satpura Bhavan. Also, Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan has dialed Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh to mobilize the Air Force teams in order to douse the blaze. Those visuals on the left side of your screen. He's also dialed the Prime Minister and reviewed the situation on the ground. MP Home Minister Narottam Mishra is on the ground, is what our reporters are telling us, is what Shailendra is telling us. Let's get to our other reporter who's also on the ground. Jitendra Sharma is joining us from the site of this blaze. Jitendra, ground zero से latest update क्या है?
बिल्कुल, अगर बात करें तो अभी का अपडेट ये है कि आग की सीधे तस्वीरें आपको दिखा सकते हैं। वो देखिए आग किस तरह से भड़की हुई है। लगातार 8 घंटे से ज्यादा का वक्त हो चुका है और ये आग की लपटें थमने का नाम नहीं ले रही हैं। हर तरह के प्रयास किए गए हैं, सेना को मोर्चा संभाल दिया गया है, एसडीआरएफ के अलावा नगर निगम और जो तमाम अमला होता है हर एक की मदद ली गई है, मगर आग की लपटों में कमी नजर नहीं आ रही है। आपको पूरे 6ठे मंजिल तक आग की लपटें अभी भी निकलती नजर आ रही है। यहाँ पर अगर बात करें तो सरकार के दो मंत्री नरोत्तम मिश्रा और विश्वास सारंग भी मौके पर पहुंचे थे। मुख्यमंत्री शिवराज सिंह चौहान ने प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी से बात की है और साथ ही रक्षा मंत्री से बात करते हुए यहाँ पर हेलीकॉप्टर भेजने की बात कही है। कुछ देर में सेना के हेलीकॉप्टर की मदद से अब इस आग पर काबू पाने की कोशिश होगी। सेना लगातार मोर्चा संभाले हुए, हर तरह से प्रशासनिक अधिकारी भी मौके पर मौजूद है, मगर ये आग है कि बुझने का नाम नहीं ले रही है और जाहिर सी बात है लगातार प्रयास किए जा रहे हैं, मगर कह सकते हैं कि इस पूरी आग को बुझने में अभी भी 1 से 2 घंटे का वक्त लगेगा। जी।
और जितेंद्र, कितने फ्लोर्स पे ये आग आ चुकी है? क्या ये बिल्डिंग एम्प्टी थी जब ये आग लगी थी? क्या लोग वहां से इवैक्यूएट हुए हैं और कितनी टीम्स अभी ग्राउंड पे हैं?
देखिए, मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूं कि ये जो बिल्डिंग थी उस समय दफ्तर लगा हुआ था। स्वास्थ्य विभाग का यहाँ पर दफ्तर है। स्वास्थ्य विभाग के जो आयुक्त हैं, कमिश्नर है, वो इस दफ्तर पर बैठते हैं। सामने ही उनका दफ्तर है और साथ ही आदिवासी कल्याण विभाग का दफ्तर है। यहाँ पर कर्मचारी काम कर रहे थे, अचानक शॉर्ट सर्किट होता है, उन्हें फिर भगदड़ मच जाती है। हालांकि गनीमत है कि सारे एम्प्लॉयज को शिफ्ट कर दिया गया, मगर किसी तरह से जनहानि नहीं हुई है। और ये जो पूरे 6 फ्लोर हैं, नीचे के 3रे माले से लेकर 4था, 5वां और 6ठा, और अब तो टॉप फ्लोर का जो टावर है वहां भी आपको धधकती हुई नजर आ रही होंगी आग की लपटें। तो ये जो कह सकते हैं कि पूरे 5 फ्लोर 6 फ्लोर पूरी तरह से आग की जद में आ चुके हैं। लंबा चौड़ा अगर इलाके की बात करें तो तकरीबन ये काफी लंबी चौड़ी बिल्डिंग है। इस कोने से लेकर लास्ट के उस कोने तक बिल्डिंग में आग की लपटें फैली हैं। सेना ने मोर्चा संभाला, हाइड्रोलिक मशीनों से, फायर फाइटर से हर तरह की मदद ली गई, मगर आग कम होने का नाम नहीं ले रही है। अब उम्मीद जताई जा रही है कि सेना के जब हेलीकॉप्टर आएंगे उन्हीं के द्वारा फायर रेस्क्यू अभियान चलाया जाएगा। देख रहे हैं आप ये किस तरह से फायर टेंडर से आग पर जो है प्रेशर डाला जा रहा है, मगर आग थम नहीं रही है क्योंकि यहाँ पर वॉल है, दीवार है जो आग को बुझने नहीं दे रही है। हवा चल रही है जिसकी वजह से पूरी बिल्डिंग आग की जद में आ चुकी है और कई सारे डॉक्यूमेंटेशन जो कह सकते हैं यहाँ पर महत्वपूर्ण डॉक्यूमेंटेशन है वो जलकर खाक हो गए। मुख्यमंत्री शिवराज सिंह चौहान लगातार इस आग की खबर पर मॉनिटरिंग कर रहे हैं। उन्होंने प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी से बात की है, उन्होंने हर तरह से मदद करने का आश्वासन दिया है, मगर जब तक आग पूरी तरह से बुझ नहीं जाती है तब तक लगातार हर एक अधिकारी और हर एक मंत्री और मुख्यमंत्री शिवराज सिंह चौहान पूरी तरह से आग पर नजर बनाए हुए हैं। जी।
Right, so as my colleague Jitendra is pointing out, there is a wall that is blocking the efforts of the firefighting teams over there because this fire is currently on the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th and has gone all the way to the top floor of this building in Bhopal, which is the Satpura Bhavan. This is where key government documents have also been placed, and as my colleague is pointing out, they have all been destroyed in this fire, which does not seem to be weakening at any point because the firefighting teams are fighting against a wall structure which is preventing their operations. Also, there are heavy winds also which are only fueling the fire, and many teams are currently on the ground to battle the blaze, but they are not being successful when it comes to battling the blaze because of the obstructions and the heavy winds, which is why the Chief Minister has dialed the Defence Minister, Rajnath Singh, to mobilize Air Force teams in order to douse the fire from the sky. I want to go back to our colleague Shailendra, who's on the ground. Shailendra, कितनी teams अभी ground पे हैं? क्या कुछ लोग इंजर हुए थे इस फायर की वजह से? कुछ लोग क्या कुछ लोग ट्रैप्ड है इस बिल्डिंग के अंदर अभी भी?
नहीं देखिए आयुष्मान आपको मैं साफ कर दूं कि 4 बजे जब आग लगी थी तो उस समय तत्काल अलर्ट हो गया था और सभी लोगों को निर्देश दे दिए गए थे। तो यहाँ पर करीब 1000 कर्मचारी हैं जो यहाँ पर दिन भर में आवागमन करते हैं। यहाँ पर अलग अलग विभागों के दफ्तर है, तो सभी कर्मचारी अलर्ट हो गए थे और ये सब समय पर इन्हें निकाल लिया गया था। सभी बिल्डिंग को खाली करा लिया गया था, इसलिए कोई भी अभी इस तरह की स्थिति नहीं है कि वहाँ पर कोई फंसा हुआ है। लेकिन यहाँ पर ये आग लगने के बाद करीब 5-6 घंटे से ज़्यादा हो चुका है, अब तो 8 घंटे होने आए हैं। तो वहाँ पर पूरा जो संपत्ति है सरकारी वो पूरी जलकर खाक हो चुकी है। कोई भी रेस्क्यू करने के से कोई फंसा हुआ नहीं था, तो कोई बड़ा नुकसान नहीं है, किसी तरह की जनहानि नहीं है। हाँ, लेकिन ये जरूर है कि यहाँ पर मैं आपको एक जानकारी ये भी दूं कि यहाँ पर जो 6ठी मंजिल है वो स्वास्थ्य विभाग का दफ्तर है। वो अभी 1 जून को ही वो पूरा नया दफ्तर रिनोवेशन के बाद पूरा तैयार हुआ था, तो वहाँ पर सारा फर्नीचर नया था और वहाँ से जो पुराना फर्नीचर शिफ्ट किया गया था वो भी नीचे ही 1 मंजिल पर रखा हुआ था। तो वो जो रखा हुआ था फर्नीचर वो सब आग की चपेट में आ गया, तो बड़ा ही करोड़ों का नुकसान हुआ है। और ये सारी चीजें हम देखिए आपको दिखाते हैं सेना का, ये देखिए ये लगातार ये आपको सेना का वाहन, ये जितने भी फायर के नए उपकरण हैं, आधुनिक फाइटर आर्मी 2 फायर फाइटर विशेष रूप से बुलाए गए हैं और ये लोग अब अपनी इनकी मॉनिटरिंग में सारा पूरा ये रेस्क्यू ऑपरेशन चल रहा है, क्योंकि यहाँ पर फायर ब्रिगेड या नगर निगम इनके सारे संसाधन अपर्याप्त हो गए थे, क्योंकि आग इतनी विकराल थी और इतनी कल्पना नहीं थी कि आग इतना विकराल रूप ले लेगी। क्योंकि यहाँ पर लगातार हवा, तेज आंधी चली, तो एक जगह पर आग बुझाई जाती थी तो वो आग दूसरी जगह से बढ़ जाती थी। तो उसके बाद सेना ने मोर्चा संभाला है, मिलिट्री पुलिस लगातार मोर्चा संभाली, लेकिन अभी भी जो 6ठी मंजिल है वहाँ पर आग बार बार धधक रही है, बार बार आग बढ़ती जा रही है। इसीलिए सेना के बाद अब हेलीकॉप्टर बुलाए गए हैं। 2 सेना के हेलीकॉप्टर अभी कुछ ही देर में पहुंचने वाले हैं और वो अब ऊपर से जाकर आग बुझाने का ऊपर से प्रयास करेंगे। अब वो किस तरह से अभी ऑपरेशन चलता है, ये अभी थोड़ी देर में, ये देखिए हम आपको दिखा रहे हैं, ये पूरा जो ऑपरेशन चल रहा है, सारे सेना के कर्मी और सारे सैनिक हैं लगातार अलग अपने जो सेना के जो फायर ब्रिगेड है, सेना का जो सिस्टम है उसके जरिए यहाँ पर आधुनिक तकनीक के जरिए अब बुझाने के प्रयास किए जा रहे हैं। तो अभी भी लेकिन आग अभी भी काबू में होती दिख नहीं रही है।
So that's the latest coming in, that it doesn't seem that the fire is under control. Those visuals on your screen, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just the firefighting, the local firefighting forces, also the military police has been mobilized to take control of the entire situation. Those visuals on the left side of your screen where the fire is raging from the 3rd, 4th, 5th to the 6th floor. And as my colleagues were pointing out, the State Health Ministry had just furnished the entire area on the 6th floor, and that has been gutted in this fire. From the 3rd to the 6th floor have all been gutted in this fire. This started around 4 p.m. It is likely to be a short circuit. There were about 1,000 people inside this building around 4 p.m. once this blaze started. They were all moved out immediately. Currently, there are no people, fortunately, inside this building, but the firefighting operations are on a war footing, but they are facing a lot of problems because there is a disruption that they are facing when it comes to dousing the area with water because of not just the height of the building, but also there are disruptions being created because of the walls. Also, at the same time, while they are dousing the fire at one spot, because of the high winds, the fire is raging on the other spot, which is why the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh has called Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. He has given the order to the Indian Air Force to mobilize teams to douse this fire from the sky. So that mobilization order has been given. Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan monitoring the situation. Already 2 state ministers are on the ground. Narottam Mishra as well as Vishwas Sarang. They are on the ground to ensure that there is no hindrance when it comes to the firefighting operations. I'm also joined by Jeetu Patwari, Congress MLA on the broadcast. Sir, ये बहुत बड़ा ब्लेज भोपाल में अभी इमर्ज हुआ है, फायर फाइटिंग ऑपरेशंस चल रहे हैं, लेकिन ये आग बुझने में बहुत टाइम लग रहा है। 8 घंटे हो गए हैं और चीफ मिनिस्टर ने अभी डिफेंस मिनिस्टर को फोन किया है ताकि वो एयरफोर्स आके इसे बुझा सके।
बिल्कुल, चीफ मिनिस्टर ने 8 घंटे बाद एयरफोर्स क्यों बुलाई जब इतनी बड़ी आग थी तो। और बात यह है कि आग बार बार वल्लभ भवन में या सतपुड़ा भवन में क्यों लगती है। 18 सितंबर 2018 में भी लगी थी है, तो ये आग हमारे मध्य प्रदेश के सचिवालय में क्यों लगती है। रही बात सेना बुलानी पड़ी, आग बुझ जाएगी, पर आग पहले लगी थी, उसके नुकसान आज तक पता नहीं चले, किसने लगाई थी, किन कारणों से हुए थे, दोषी कौन है, आज तक पता नहीं चला। तो अल्टीमेटली ये सरकार चल रही है सर्कस।
अच्छा, आप कह रहे हैं कि ये आप कह रहे हैं डिलिबरेटली आग लगाई है।
50% कमीशन के एविडेंस को मिटाने के लिए सोची समझी साजिश के तहत लगाई गई आग है।
अच्छा, तो आप कह रहे हैं ये साजिश है, ये पूरी ये सरकार ने आग लगवाई है इस भवन पे।
सरकारी ऑफिस में आग लगती है और नए ऑफिस में आग लगती है, नया ऑफिस है ये, सब तरह की सेफ्टी, हर तरह की फायर सेफ्टी की इसमें प्रोसेस किया गया है। इसके बाद आग क्यों लगी। इससे पहले 2018 में पुराने वल्लभ भवन में आग लगी थी, क्यों लगी थी। सतपुड़ा भवन में आग हमेशा क्यों लगती है और क्यों, किन लोगों के कारण लगी, कारण पता ही क्यों नहीं चलते हैं। अगर पिछले 18 में आग लगी थी तो अगर किन कारणों से लगी, फिर तो उसका सेफ्टी पॉइंट आपने मैपअप क्यों नहीं किया। ये बात सवाल है या नहीं है।
मैं तो कहता हूँ सवाल तो आप पूछ सकते हैं, आप पूरा हक है आपका सवाल पूछने का, पर अभी फोकस होना चाहिए कि ये फायर डाउस हो जाए। आप तो अभी से ही पॉलिटिक्स खेल रहे हैं।
ये आपको पॉलिटिक्स दिख रही है, हमें मध्य प्रदेश का भविष्य दिख रहा है। हमें ये करप्शन जो अद्भुत कर्जा ले लिया मध्य प्रदेश की सरकार ने 4 लाख करोड़ का, और उसमें करप्शन किए, वो दिख रहा है। आपको पॉलिटिक्स दिख रही है और हमें वो भावना दिख रही है कि जो लोग एक बार हो गया, 2 बार हो गया, 3 बार, 4 बार आग लगती है क्या।
Right. Let's not indulge in politics right now. Thank you, Mr. Jitu Patwari, for sharing your perspective. For now, the need of the hour is to ensure that this blaze is under control. Congress not leaving a stone unturned when it comes to playing politics over this, saying that this was deliberately started by the government in order to hide evidence of corruption. Let's go back to our reporters. Shailendra Chauhan and Jitendra Sharma continue to be with us on the broadcast. Shailendra, अभी ground zero से latest update क्या है? Also, हमें पता लग रहा है कि एयरफोर्स अपनी ये टीम्स कब मोबिलाइज कर रही है, क्या वो मोबिलाइज कर चुके? ओके, वी लॉस्ट शैलेंद्र। लेट मी गो टू जितेंद्र शर्मा हु कंटिन्यूज टू बी विद अस ऑन द ग्राउंड। जितेंद्र, कोई आइडिया है कि ये एयरफोर्स टीम्स की मोबिलाइजेशन का टाइमलाइन क्या है, कितनी देर में यहाँ पहुंच सकते हैं? क्योंकि जैसे आप कह रहे हैं वहां पे ग्राउंड टीम्स इस ब्लेज को डाउस करने में असफल हो रहे हैं, पर और इसकी एयरफोर्स टीम्स ही इसको डाउस कर सकते हैं, और वो ऑर्डर तो रक्षा मंत्री से आ चुका है। उनकी मोबिलाइजेशन का कोई टाइमलाइन है आपके पास?
बिल्कुल, अगर बात करें तो हाफ एन आवर के अंदर यहाँ पर अब जो हेलीकॉप्टर के द्वारा, सेना के हेलीकॉप्टर के द्वारा फायर रेस्क्यू अभियान चलाया जाएगा। देख सकते हैं आग लगातार अनकंट्रोल होती जा रही है। पिछले 8 घंटे से ज़्यादा का वक्त हो चुका है और आपको ये आग की लपटें उड़ती हुई नजर आ रही हैं। तो जाहिर सी बात है अब सेना का हेलीकॉप्टर एकमात्र विकल्प है, क्योंकि सारे प्रयास विफल हो चुके हैं। हाइड्रोलिक क्रेन इतनी ज़्यादा बड़ी नहीं है जो वहाँ तक हाइट तक पहुँच जाए। ये अगर बात करें तो 7-8वीं मंजिल है ये, जमीन से लेकर ग्राउंड फ्लोर से लेकर, और सारे महत्वपूर्ण डॉक्यूमेंटेशन यहाँ पर है, मगर सारे जलकर खाक हो चुके हैं। बस आग को बुझाना अब एकमात्र विकल्प बचा है। मुख्यमंत्री शिवराज सिंह चौहान ने लगातार बात की है, मगर आग की लपटों का ये आप अंदाजा देख सकते हैं कि इन आग को अगर बुझाया नहीं जाएगा तो ये आग सुबह तक यूं ही धधकती रहेगी। और इसी की तरह अगर बात करें दूसरा पहलू, यहाँ पर जो कांच लगे हैं, ग्लास लगे हैं हर बिल्डिंग में, वो आग की लपटों से ब्लास्ट हो रहे हैं। अंदर जो इक्विपमेंट रखे हैं, एयर कंडीशनर लगे हैं, वो भी लगातार ब्लास्ट होते जा रहे हैं। तो दूर सेफ्टी पर्पज से मीडिया पर्सन्स एंड दूसरे लोगों को यहाँ से दूर कर दिया है, मगर यहाँ पर मॉनिटरिंग की जा रही है कि जल्द ही सेना का हेलीकॉप्टर आएगा। उसके लिए पर्याप्त सुविधाएं, पर्याप्त व्हीकल्स यहाँ पर कर रहे जा रहे हैं, क्योंकि लाइट्स वगैरह भी प्रॉपर होने